Bonjour and welcome to La French Tech On Air, our European video podcast series on business and technology. In Europe, the French tech ecosystem is made of 27 communities. They are connecting local innovation to the French startup scene, creating a bridge to European tech movement. My name is Billy. I am the co-founder of La French Tech Cracovie. I will be your host and moderator for this podcast episode. Today, we'll speak with Raph Crouan, president of La French Tech London. Raph, welcome. We are very happy to have you here for this podcast today.
Thank you. Very happy to be here with you.
It's my pleasure. So maybe let's start with a few words about yourself. Can you give a few sentences and introduce your journey maybe?
Of course, happy to. So as you can imagine, I'm a Frenchman in London. I've been in London for 17 years. And I'm originally from Paris. Having worked a lot with the French tech ecosystem. When we opened the first French tech hub in London back in 2012, I was part of the story, obviously. And then I took over the role of president of French tech back in 2019. On the side of that, I am an investor, an entrepreneur, an advisor. I do everything tech related. I love helping entrepreneurs in general. And that's also, of course, very complementary to my day job, which is head of business for tech clients in Europe for one of the biggest, if not the biggest, European tech legal firm called Oric. So that's what I do during the day, and the rest of the day, and the rest of the night, and the weekends, of course, I work for French Tech.
That's really impressive. I have to say that you have a pretty extensive background in tech, and we're really happy to discuss more into details like what's your role in the French tech. So maybe can you introduce a bit more how the French Tech London is collaborating with the local community?
Of course. Yeah, so French Tech London is, if I am not completely mistaken, the biggest hub or community outside of France when it comes to Europe anyway. We have a community of about 2,500 plus members that is composed by a mix of entrepreneurs, investors, corporate partners, and you name it, other service providers. So it's a very active community. Not surprisingly, a lot of French people in London, but the core bridges between the French technology ecosystem and the London technology ecosystem or the UK technology ecosystem have always been very strong. And our community it displays that strength, and we do collaborate with a lot of different sort of associations and different sort of organizations, and Tech Nation being one of them, of course, which is a sort of equivalent to the French Tech in London. We do work a lot with Tech London Advocates, which is a group of close to 10,000 now members, which is really around, the economy of technology as well. French Tech is plugged into the ecosystem. We do a lot of different activities, and I'm sure we'll go back to that. But it's been an incredible journey to see the progression of the community.
You do a lot of activities around, and you can see how the French Tech London is supporting the local innovation and gathering change makers and corporate startup investors locally, and that's really impressive. And maybe London is known obviously for being a financial hub, one of the biggest financial hubs in the world. Can you explain how does it affect the tech in your local region?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. Hub of fintech, hub of financial institutions, hub of everything finance, really, London. It not only affects it, but it makes it core to what we do. The biggest companies coming out of the UK are mostly fintech related. You can blur fintech and insurtech to some extent. Anything related to financial transactions or related regulatory transactions, I think is close to. And if you take an example of some of the biggest companies we see here, you've heard of Revolut, you've heard of Wise, you've heard of Starling Bank, you've heard of Monzo. All those big neobank or transactional sort of based companies are all been born in the UK. So it's a big factor to the expansion of the entire tech community, but it's not the only one. And we have other type of segments that are very strong, such as actually deep tech, very strong. We look at medtech, which is a good one. We look at biotech with the hub of Cambridge and Cambridge University, which is huge. We have a lot of quantum computing as well, and then the classic SaaS businesses such as food delivery systems. Deliveroo is coming out of the UK, for example, right? So you got a lot of different sort of big companies and ex-unicorn, new decacorn, whatever you want to call them, that came out of the UK and that we look into. And I would bridge that with the fact that, of course, it's a massive market for potential big French companies that are expanding here. And we've seen a number of Next 40 and future 120 coming to the UK that are very interested in capturing that market as maybe the first one outside of France, if not, part of the top 2 or 3.
Yeah, no, definitely. And actually, you mentioned a few unicorns or even more corns, and we all know them. But as an investor, startup mentor, do you have maybe some example of some, names of startup or scale up that impressed you lately?
Oof, where do we start? It's a complicated question because there's so many that we look into and we try to support. One of the key new trends that nobody can ignore is around Web3, right? And Web3, being blockchain related, NFT connected, crypto sensible, whatever you want to call that, is a massive market that came down crashing a little bit with the recession that we're just getting into right now. Having said that, the strength of the decentralization systems around Web3 is still very much a reality. And we supported with Auric Sorare, for example, in France, which is an incredible rocket ship. I mean, they raised the biggest Series B in the world, 685 million, if I'm correct, which is phenomenal. But also they are generating a lot of cash. They are actually a profitable business, which is one of the good trends that we see, and one that is going to be sustainably here to stay. Because again, over the last 5 to 10 years, most of the venture-backed businesses were burning cash like crazy, like no one else, without actually generating any revenue. And that trend is not here to stay because of the current climate of the market. So things are changing fast, and now investors want to be a little bit more cautious in investing in businesses that will have actually a proper, revenue generating idea or business plan. So yeah, I could name tons of different companies. I think the Web3 space is very exciting. Sorare was a good example. There's a ton of others that we look into and we support, but we don't have enough time to discuss all of them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we'll talk about it more in the second part of this interview. But actually, I want to go back to the topic of French Tech London. So this is definitely a vibrant, energetic community. How does the French Tech contribute with what kind of actions, what kind of support? Can you give me more about details about your weekly, maybe monthly actions?
Yeah, we're very active now. As everybody else for the last 2 years has been a little bit less, of a face-to-face activity, but we double down on making different things virtually as most people would, right? So we had, to give you an example, a week full of a conference around diversity, inclusion, and belonging. We had 70 different speakers from 20 different countries joining us for a full week of incredible content around the topic that is core to many of us. And so that's one of the things that we try to do, is we try to bring communities around Europe to be with us. And when I say communities, I'm talking French Tech communities. So we had French Tech Cracovie participated, we had French Tech Amsterdam, we had a lot of different people participating. So it was a good combination of bringing talent from the outside with a lot of speakers from that particular sort of context and segment, but also a contribution from many of our brothers from the French Tech community. So that was a good example. We also launched last year a mentoring program. We take every year about 10 companies that we support through set of mentoring with top mentors from our French Tech London community. That's a very thought after program because we basically give them a lot of love, and they love that in return. It's obviously completely free. We have a lot of applicants, and we do a proper selections around that. We do regular events now that we can do that again. So we typically had yesterday our summer drinks on the rooftop with a view on the entire Tower Bridge, which was phenomenal. We had about 50 plus people showing up for that. We do podcasts, regular podcasts. We've probably published north of 50 podcasts now around various different topics, from sports and tech to biotech to you name it, any kind of topic that is interesting to the community, fintech, obviously. What else? We do so many things, right? So we do what we call a café serré. Café serré is an interesting model, which is basically a very quick morning, intimate and filmed interview, kind of a fireside chat with one key actor of the market, being an entrepreneur or an investor or a partner, different type of profiles every time. And we love doing those because it's one of those very curated conversation that doesn't last long. It's about a half an hour, and it's great to be able to follow. And then we turn that into a podcast so that people can listen to it afterwards as well.
Yeah, that's a great format. There is a lot of activity. And fun fact is that, yeah, I noticed Café Serré on the French Tech London website. And, it's funny because I think it fits perfectly to the entrepreneur style. It's in the morning, entrepreneurs used to wake up so early to, because there is so many things to do. And then, it's the right time because they still have a lot of energy and before the maybe rush of the day starts. So it's really fun. And maybe between all of this action, obviously, between entrepreneurs, we know that we have success, we have also failure. So maybe can you share a bit one biggest success of French Tech London and maybe something that could have been done differently or lesson learned?
I think one of our biggest success was to have that community grow and be still connected through COVID. And we see the engagement that we still have today with, the people that are, applied for the mentoring program, for that matter. It's been a very rounding success. We had a lot of people applying. We had a lot of press, visibility as well. Some of my key board members that were behind this initiative actually got quoted several times in various different publications. So I think it's great because it reflects well on the community and gives us a nice visibility as well, not only to the board people, but even from obviously to the startups that participate. So it's kind of a good success. And of course, if I go back to the parties that were organized pre-pandemic, and I'm definitely, and you can quote me on that, doing one this year again, we tend to have about 300 plus people attending to our big, annual party. And that's a big success. We tend to have, we used to have Cedrico, the minister, coming. We had Kat at the time, head of French Tech, coming. And I'm definitely hoping that this year, again, when we do this big one, we'll have Clara coming, we'll have, other people joining, and maybe the new minister as well. So it's a good success. When it comes to failure or things we could have done better, I'm going to tell you honestly, I think I underestimated the importance of the camaraderie that French Tech would bring to the table. And I think we could have done even more. And to give you an example, I think we had a fantastic set of virtual activities that we did over the pandemic. But I did not rely enough on the crowd to be more, wild in a way, to do that what they wanted to do. And it was a little bit too controlled. And I think, lesson learned, those guys are entrepreneurs by design. They probably have much better ideas than I do, or every one of us at the board has. And we should probably rely on them a little bit more. And as a matter of fact, we started having last year, even a bit before, actually, a group of volunteers around each of our core verticals. I didn't really specify that, but we are organized in 3 core verticals. One, not surprisingly, which is fintech. It's London. We talked about this. The second one, which is deep tech, because it encompasses a couple of different key segments where we look into AI being one of them. We talk quantum a bit. We talk robotics, IoT. We talk, a couple of different things. And the third one is tech for good, which is more of an horizontal than a vertical. And it captures sustainability, diversity, inclusion, health, all the different things that are important to everyone, basically. And so those 3 segments, every time, in my board in the organization, we have a head and a lead and a co-lead. And those groups are now surrounded by a bunch of volunteers. There are people from the community that are very active and extremely excited to participate to the French Tech movement, basically. And it's incredible, the energy that we get out of this. So lesson learned from me, trust them to do that better than we do.
That's a great lesson. And I think that's also a good thing for everyone leading a project. Maybe see what's the potential of people around you and see how you can benefit and emphasize that. Before going further, I know that you're a French guy, and I like having this question because we are French. We all miss a bit friends, of course. So what do you miss the most?
Boulangerie. Une bonne boulangerie. That's it. I mean, this is it. You have a lot of great food in London because now,
Yeah,
as long as you can pay for
of
it, it's
course.
phenomenal the amount
I
of food
can
you get.
imagine.
But nothing will replace a good baguette fresh in the morning. I'm sorry. It's just not the same.
Now I'm asking the question to many French people, and every time it goes to food, it comes back to
Of
food.
course. What else?
It's now blood.
We can
But
talk a lot about what we're missing in tech and the connectivity to
yeah,
BPI and blah blah blah, but that's not true. The
yeah,
reality
no
is it's all
baguette.
about food, always about food.
No, you're right, Raph. Okay, so actually going back, the finance being biggest of one of the biggest, area or industry in London, it's something that nobody can argue with. And we want to discuss a bit further how is the climate right now? Because obviously, when you're an entrepreneur, when you are growing a company, a startup, or even if you want to scale, finance is really a big topic and a big factor of success or sometimes failure because you need to find the right investor, the right VC, how to find that. There is a lot of different specificity that maybe new founder don't have experience with. And I know that have a lot of experience as an investor, having this startup bootcamp, a lot of different areas. So can you tell me a bit more about the condition of fundraising climate and the consequences for startup in the process of funding rounds right now?
Things have changed a lot over the last few months, as you might have seen. Last year, raising $100 million on a 500 million valuation on a piece of paper in a term sheet that would go on 48 hours was not an exception. And this is crazy, right? The market was on fire. There was a lot of capital. There was a lot of startups created. There was a lot of bad ideas getting financed. And, for a bunch of different macro reasons that I'm not going to get into, one of them being the war in Ukraine, the second one, or the first one being the pandemic, second one being the war in Ukraine. Of course, everything came crashing down over the last few months. And it's a good thing in a sense, because we need rebalancing. It was crazy. It was too much. And it was, hitting towards a massive explosion. I think what happened now is there's a bit of a rebalancing. We put things back into perspective. And so surely there's a couple of things that are going to happen. First one, and that's true for pretty much every financing round. So it's not necessarily at early stage only. First, the due diligence between a deal, between the time you actually ask for money and the time you actually get the money is going to be thorough and a lot longer. So forget about the 48 hours term sheet. It's going to take, 4 to 6 months to get something done. And that's an average normal time to get that amount of money first. The second thing is, as I mentioned earlier, you'd better make sure that your product, your idea, or your solution is actually generating revenue, as in empty shells and promises will not suffice anymore. You'll have to have a company with a significant amount of traction or cash generating ideas/businesses. And that's where, the money is going to go to. And third, there's tons of other ways of financing that are being opened right now. Debt being one of them, even though it's came down crashing as well because of the debt level, but it's still there. There's a tons of other options that people are looking as alternative to financing their companies rather than just pure equity VC rounds, right? So that's I think the three things that we need to keep in mind. Having said that, there has been a massive amount of capital raised by the venture capitalists, across Europe and the world over the last decade, of course, but even more over the last 2 years. And so there's massive dry powder that will be deployed in any case over the next 2 to 3 to 5 years maximum, because it will have to. It's part of, they have a timeline to deploy the money. So not a risk of not getting capital, just a risk of doing the wrong idea with not enough revenue so that you get the traction and the actual sort of interest from the venture capitalist community. If you do have a good product, if you have the good team behind it, because it's always absolutely critical, get the good team behind it, then you get the money. There will be some. They will be having rounds. It will take longer, but you'll get it. So that's my view on the current sort of conditions of the financing and the fundraising space right now. The ecosystem is slowed down. It's taking a lot longer. People won't do much during the summer, of course, but it will start again in September, October timeframe. And there's going to be a lot happening before the end of the year. Just, get ready to be a lot more nimble, a lot less cash intensive, a lot less cash burning when you're in a company with existing run rate. You want to make sure that you cash burn is pretty low so that you can sustain longer, so that you can get to the next financing round basically.
That's really good tips. Thanks a lot. And actually, I'm a bit going back to what you're saying. Yeah, the team is really important because I know that, I mean, this is a famous saying when you're trying to raise some fund that, you know, the idea is one thing, but if you have one idea, there can be thousands of people who have the same idea. And many times it's the execution that matter, what kind of things, like how people can execute that idea. And it's
99% of the time, it's the team.
yeah,
No doubt.
exactly. And actually, it's really important to see, you know, what VC, what investors are looking at. And thank you for giving that's input. I want to see also maybe from the other side, as a, I don't know, a founder, an entrepreneur. How do you select the best VC or the best investor? What you need to look at?
That's a good question. And that's one that a lot of people are asking, particularly these days, because things are changing. And as I said, because there's a lot of capital, you can knock at a number of doors and expect money to come through. I think there's two real key elements here. First, depending on your segment, depending on the market you're targeting, having a specialist is always a better idea than none, because they're going to bring smart money. They're going to bring on more on top of the check. They're going to bring, expertise, connection, network related, FX, all the things that you want in your market that will enable you to grow and scale faster. So you want to choose somebody who is actually understanding the market first and is being there before, potentially invested in that same area as well, because that's what most VC do. That's the first thing, and it's a critical one, right? The second one is it's better to get a little bit less money than too much. So don't necessarily go for the massive big check from a big name. Having a smaller investor that has an understanding of being more active and are really keen on supporting is probably better than having just a big name on the cap table with somebody who's going to, block you at every decision-making process. So be smart in the way you select the partners. As I'm not going to say anything that everybody knows what I'm going to say. It's not a rocket science or a secret to say that, when you get in bed with a VC and you're actually raising capital, it's like getting a marriage. You'd better make sure you select the right partner, right? So it's the same idea here. You have to, select it wisely, make sure that there is a fit on both sides. I said the same for VCs that want to invest in such companies. If they don't feel there's something there, they don't have the fit with the funders, better pass, right? So I think those are two key things. There's many other options that we could talk about, many other sort of good tips, but I think those are two key important ones.
No, I can imagine. And how does it look like from abroad, or even more specifically from France, as a French entrepreneur? How would you compare the financial market or looking for funds in the UK compared to France?
France has dramatically grew over the last decade when it comes to funding options and when it comes to the size of the venture community. It used to be a couple of private equity fund putting a bit of money in tech because it was fun and trendy at the time. Now, fast forward to last year, we've outpaced our number of unicorns. We have more funds than we've ever had at every single level, not only at early stage but at growth level. The rapport TB just helped spread ahead the actual sort of growth money as well. So pension fund are now putting money as well in there. So there's a lot of capital in France, and not only from the traditional school VCs that we used to have, the Oasio, the Partech, and others, but also from new fund that got created out of that new generation of GPs, right? So it's a good market to be in right now, and I think it's pretty compelling. Having said that, London is probably 2 to 3 times bigger when it comes to the size of options and money, right? And there's a couple of reasons for it. First, it's older, right? It started a lot longer before. It's about 10 years older in terms of the ecosystem of the financing and technology. So of course, you got more money over time, and kind of a generation before of people that re-put the money in. So it's kind of that trickle effect. The second thing is UK put in place very early on what is a tax incentives for early stage / angel investors called SEIS, which basically allows you to discount up to 70% of your income tax when you invest on your benefit. So it's a massive incentive for people to put their money into technology companies rather than just leave them in the bank accounts or under the pillows, right? And that's something that we never really put in place in France. So the very early stage ecosystem took a lot longer to grow. It's in good shape now, but it's still much, much bigger in the UK. So you'll have more angel potential investors in early stage businesses in the UK than you'd ever have in any other country in Europe. And so there are two things that I can think about in terms of the differences right now. One more thing I'd say though, and it's both a good and a bad thing, is the amount of public money that you get out of France is proportionally much bigger than anywhere else in Europe, and as a matter of fact, even much bigger than the one that in the UK. UK don't really do BPI stuff, right? There is British Business Bank, but British Business Bank invests primarily in funds, not directly. And so when BPI does both, both direct and indirect financing, so both in technology companies and startups and in funds, they helped grow the ecosystem a lot. So it's a great thing because it's a very stable foundation for the ecosystem itself. The backdrop of that is French startups rely way too much on public money. And the minute you get that public money, which is not free money, but it kind of is, and you go and want to see a competitor that coming from the US has raised 100 million while you raise about 120, K from BPI, you just can't compete anymore, and you've just waste valuable time rather than just trade away for proper capital. And so that's one of the things that I'm seeing now is it's a bit of a change in the community and looking into public money as a good kick-up startup, but not necessarily a route to go over the long term, because it kind of could be a crippling effect at the end of the day.
So talking about change, I need to ask, because after a few months that the Brexit happened, how did it change the situation for the ecosystem, for the industry?
Oh, the B word. I thought we were not talking about this today. Brexit was announced back in 2016 or so. Nothing really changed for a couple of years until Article 50 got triggered, which was in 2019. And that started to affect a few things, but more than anything else, perception. For the tech ecosystem in particular, companies that used to come very easily to the UK, being able to recruit talent from anywhere, could not do that anymore because of visas, right? Simply enough, you couldn't hire somebody from Ukraine or from anywhere in Europe without having to have a visa for them to come through. So that changed quite a bit. Then the pandemic happened, and hybrid models of working remotely became a norm, and so visas was not much of an issue anymore, because in any case people could work from anywhere and you had to respect that. So it's been a balancing a little bit that in a different sort of way. Now we're getting back to normal, and now people want to get to be together again. I think we're now realizing there is a number of areas where Brexit is going to be impacting us on a daily basis. We talked about food a bit before. We don't get as many outside products that we used to. To give you a concrete example, I ordered a piece of electronic the other day coming from the Netherlands. I had to pay £70 of tax duty to make them go through border, which was insane. So there's a couple of things like that are quite painful. But on a daily basis, it doesn't really change much for us lucky few that live in a big city. The ones that are going to be the more impacted, as usual, are going to be the one in other regions, right? Typically the northern of the UK used to be subsidized and sponsored by the European Union to a tune of 70% of their entire education system. So now, half if not 3/4 of their professorial teams are gone. They don't get the funding necessary. They're about to close some of the universities. So that's more of a long-term impact that we're not seeing just yet, but that's going to have impact over the next 10, 15 years. And there's a lot more areas around funding, around financing, around the transportation rights, around visa schemes, all that kind of things that will have to be adapted, discussed, changed, whatever you want to call it, to reflect the changes that Brexit is bringing on.
So we'll need to rediscuss in a few years, and you tell us how is it going.
Oh, they will. They will. We will, and trust me, they will keep on discussing. Now that Boris is gone, let's see what the next one, the next clown is going to do. We don't know yet.
And still it seems compelling. And for an entrepreneur or a company who wants to, invest or coming to London, to the UK in general, what first step would you advise?
Do your homework. Don't just come here. It's a big scene. It's one that didn't wait for you. There's a lot more competition, but there's also a lot more options and also a lot more access. So, we actually produced a welcome guide that is available on our website. That is a good starting point to sort of look at the key first point of contacts that you can have when you come as a new company or a new entrepreneur in the UK and in London in particular. The second step is, show up to a couple of the meetups and activities and there's tons about every day now that things are picking up, just to get you familiarized with the ecosystem itself and get to meet people. The great thing about the tech world, particularly in the UK, is that people are very open-minded and super welcoming. So no one is going to, force you not to be there. So just, show up and you'll get to meet people, and then that's the way you build your business over here.
Yeah, for instance, joining your next party, French Tech London party, rooftop party.
For example, absolutely. September.
Yes, we keep that, save the date. Thanks a lot, Raph. It's been a really pleasant time. A lot of insightful tips for people looking for learning more about London, the ecosystem, but also learning how to raise some funds. So thanks a lot. A lot of different experiences. We could talk even more about, the format, for the short format we want to keep. That would be enough for today, and we really appreciate. So we want to thank everyone also for being with us. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Raph, President of French Tech London. Check their website, their social media. The session is available on video on YouTube and audio only on all the global podcast platforms. You can follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube to be updated about the next episode. À bientôt.